I'm very lucky in my life, actually. I have a very youthful, talented team. They're a wonderful bunch, and they are definitely spatial geeks. I continue to tell them that I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So for the moment, the head of Spatial Data Center of Excellence it is. The safety aware and highly autonomous driving. A presentation of two halves, really, from me today. I want to talk a little bit about HERE Technologies. It's wonderful to be here, by the way, in Brisbane, a city that I have passed through on so many occasions and not stopped to take it in. I'm particularly enjoying it because I looked at the weather forecast today, and in the Netherlands where I am, it's -2, so I should be soaking up as much vitamin D as possible before I end up on that flight. So I want to cover a few topics around here first, and it's an interesting story, and we've been engaging on the booth with a number of people. At the moment, we're not really engaging on the booth because the majority of my colleagues are sat here in the audience. So there's the good news, but they will be available after I finish speaking. HERE Technologies is many will know it as Navtech. Many will remember it as Nokia. There's really a lot of different changes we've made over the company. I've been part of the company for 10 years. But in some senses, the core of what the company does and has done in the past remains the same. We are really one of the market leaders in car navigation. You look there on our figures, 4 out of 5 of cars in North America have a HERE map powered in-car navigation system. And again, it leads us, unfortunately, to be a little bit anonymous because you equate what's in that car with the brand of the vehicle. But there's now actually over 8,500 of us based in a number of offices around the world. We collect terabytes and terabytes of data to make sure that we can keep our map as fresh as possible. In the good old days, we used to update that once every quarter. That's not good enough anymore. We now update that map on a regular, on a weekly, and even on a daily basis. We have a number of cars. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the cars that we use and how we collect our data. But yeah, over 30 years as a technology company. Which is quite an impressive track record in terms of a company. I'm certainly very proud of that as a history. But we know that the world is changing. It's getting quicker. It's getting faster, and the sort of the sub-theme of the presentation today is becoming more autonomous. We can't achieve those sort of map update figures, for example, without autonomy and automation. So we know that more people living in more cities, requiring different modes of transport around those cities, different thoughts and ideas about where they get their energy from. We have here just a couple of examples: end-to-end mobility and precision agriculture. I was talking to someone earlier today about precision agriculture and some of the impacts of that. We need to look and resolve those fundamental problems, and HERE is positioning itself nowadays to be really one of the leaders with a map-based platform to make sure that we can play our part in that autonomous world. So here's just a sort of a little brief overview. I'll put the second part on. This was the traditional place where HERE Technologies lived, the data platform. We would provide data to you at your request on a quarterly basis and keep it updated. But that's not enough now. We talk about the Esri platform. HERE likewise also has that. So we have a data marketplace where we can exchange data with our customers, potential customers, and our partners. We have a developer environment now and a platform, so we regard ourselves as a platform company. And certainly, we're looking, for those of you who aren't aware and don't know, there will be for those who register on the developer.com today, there is possibly the chance to win a GoPro, so please come and join us on the stand for that. And finally, there's services and solutions on top of that. So a full stack now in terms of what HERE does, and this is a fundamental change to how we manage and organize the company. And just a little shout out on the Spatial Data Center of Excellence. Part of what I do is based around innovation. I'm a very lucky man. I get to travel the world, talk to keen and interested people like yourselves, people in this sphere, and all over, trying to generate new innovative ideas and make sure we can accelerate that innovation process. To that end, by the way, if there's any of those from the academic community, we are giving away free samples of our data. I would love to talk to you if for academic purposes, studentships, research work, please come and talk to me about that. a little later on. So, all sorts of markets that we are engaged with, but it's this bit at the top I want to talk about, and we'll now move into part 2, and I'm afraid there are going to be some acronyms coming your way, but I'll keep them to a minimum, I promise. And the best way to overcome some of those acronyms is to talk a little bit about how much we talk about automation, we talk about autonomy, we talk about vehicles. Actually, it's already there. So, audience participation time. Hands up, who drives a car that has some form of autonomy, automated windscreens, cruise control, lane control? Yep, it's being, hold the hell, keep the hands up there. That's what, yeah, that's the majority of people in the room. Still keep your hands up if you have them all engaged every time. Yeah, that's when it goes down. It's quite funny. I'm the same. Lane control, steering wheel wobbles, I hate that. But what it does is it starts to show and demonstrate that there is an appetite for autonomy in vehicles in small ways. And so the ADAS aspect is kind of where we are at the moment in terms of the automotive marketplace. And I want to focus a bit about where we're going to, and that's the HAD, highly autonomous driving. Yep, let's keep going forward rather than backwards. Okay, just one quick question before we go into there, or just a quick moment. Stronger with our partners, I wanted to just give a quick shout out here. We are now majority owned by German car companies, and actually the examples I'm going to show you are based from those customers. Again, German car companies tend to be relatively conservative manufacturers. There's a long lead-in and lag time for car development, and so we want to make sure that we provide the best and safest services for them, and of course Esri. Here, Esri, stronger with our partners. We've actually been platinum partners for a number of years now. So, where? Highly autonomous driving. It's about levels of autonomy. I mentioned that before. It's probably at this point when we imagine autonomous driving, the first thoughts, unfortunately, are to those incidents and issues where things go wrong. And I could put on a slide there of headlines, but I'm not going to. We all know and aware, in fact last week I think we had a report out on an unfortunate incident with an autonomous vehicle in the US where a lady pedestrian was killed. Yeah, that's at one end, but actually autonomy is more a sort of a progressive, an evolution phase, if you will. But we have to understand and remember that it's not a plane. What do I mean by it's not a plane? I have already taken many flights on my journey here to Singapore, to Melbourne, to Sydney, to Brisbane. I should be on a plane again tomorrow for a long time. Not many people are aware, because we talk about autonomy in planes and boats particularly, or ships I should say, that probably 99% of the time that I've been on the flights for the last few hours, few days and weeks, it's been automatically controlled. Planes have one big advantage, of course. They're flying up in the air. They have to avoid each other, and they have to avoid mountains. But pretty much it's relatively straightforward open space. But the 1% when it's not automatic, most people aren't aware, is the takeoff and landing. It's always done by a human being. Nearly always done by a human being. Why? Because it's the most complicated part of your journey, and because it's the most complicated part of your journey, someone has to have their hands on the stick in case something goes wrong, because they will make a different and or a better decision than a machine. So think of cars and how they work. They've got many more things they have to deal with: street furniture, trees, other cars, operating on the same plane in the same area. They've got pedestrians, they've got walkways, they've got to understand in all of this. So our client request here was, how can we start to understand a bit more about safety? Where are those danger areas? And as Ian mentioned, there's a couple of areas I'm going to examine, but also what analytics can we then provide to our customer in terms of spatial data to then help the car to learn. We're all living in not just an autonomous world now, we're living in a world where we talk about machine learning and then ultimately to AI. So we're slowly on track to see if we can provide that sort of evidence and analytics to make sure that we can develop systems that cars and vehicles will learn. My vehicle's very good learning. It's got lots of sensors now, so it can pick up when I've got speed limits and speed traps and all sorts of things happening, and that's what we're trying to do here. First of all, let's talk about the data. Then we'll talk about the tools in terms of how we use Esri software to develop the analytics. So we spend a lot of time collecting a lot of data. It is about the lions, Ian, absolutely. So we have a range of vehicles. They capture data on most of our gradings of roads. We grade roads 1 through 5, 1 being high-level highways, state highways, interstates, 5 being the sort of car that you drive off the road that you would drive off to go into your driveway, sort of suburban areas. We use high-resolution speed cameras to make sure that we capture the images as we go along. We also collect the tracks here of data. You can see even when there's not a good GPS signal, the car will still know where it's located. And we will be running those vehicles on a very, very regular basis all over the world, based on our levels 1 and 2 roads primarily, to make sure that we capture the very latest information. For those of you who've seen our demonstration, we're actually showing some of the LiDAR data. Also, we capture LiDAR data on that, street-level LiDAR data. This is actually very important in terms of how autonomous vehicles ultimately will start to learn and understand what it is they're looking for, what it is they need to avoid, what it is they need to be aware of. Again, street signs, street furniture. The level of detail, in fact, even on this image, you can see pedestrians in the bottom left-hand side of the image there. So we need to make sure that we can teach the vehicle and understand, and you need tetrabytes and tetrabytes of data to be able to start to bring in that intelligence that the vehicles will need. Moving on to the spatial and DAS analytics. I know it sounds like a Dutch word, I promise you it's not. It's data analytics as a service. This is what the team in the Spatial Data Center of Excellence, what we've been doing and reviewing and trying to drive towards informing our customers, the client request, about safety. Some of these things I think we know quite a lot about. The car needs to understand about urban canyons, yeah? I mean, if there's no GPS signal, the car will not know where it is physically on the road. Clearly that's extremely unsafe. The vehicle needs to understand where it is at all times. And so that is one issue. I'm not going to go into details. I think most people are fairly clear about urban canyons. Stacked and parallel roads. I'm going to talk about those in a bit more detail, show you a bit of some of the analysis we're doing. Ramps and connected accesses. Again, vehicles need to understand when a road is the road they are on, or whether the road is simply connecting to, and the different levels and gradings between the roads in anticipation when it's coming for an exit, that it's going to have to slow down and start moving its way around an exit, a cloverleaf, or whatever that exit may be. Highly reliable features. Again, features that repeat themselves. In this case, it's traffic lights. But those features, we mentioned the LiDAR data before, we need to employ those. We need to make sure that the cars and the data that underpins will learn. And then likewise, ADAS to HAD elevation comparisons. Again, that's partly linked also to cell signals and a range of other aspects. So there's lots of things we can look at that would lead us to start to produce much safer vehicles and underpin that with safety. I'm going to talk about stacked and parallel roads. It all looks very complicated in that regard. But yeah, it's absolutely true. If you think of any vehicles, any roadways where you've got one roadway over another, if you think of any vehicles, any areas where you've got bridges, you've got stacked elevations, I can certainly think of very good examples that I've met. The vehicle doesn't understand a Z value, in which case it doesn't know what it's anticipating next when it's going either low deck, high deck, and where it's going to be going and moving off next. Likewise, when it passes over an underpass, we don't want vehicles looking at that one road going one way at a right angle and trying to make the right angle turn. That's not going to work. So we started to develop a technique, and I'll just quickly show. Now, forgive me, this is going to be 2 days of analysis in the space of a couple of minutes. So I won't even hope to keep up with it. But this is the sort of aspects of parallel roads. There's a very complicated stacked road. You can see why a car would get very confused. But it's more this case that we're concerning about, these edge cases where the road aspects look very similar. This is an area of Stuttgart. So we did this in Germany. This is just one road, one area of Stuttgart. And so we're looking for any roads that are crossing over. This the light green road there is the highway. The Category 1 road, from our perspective. And so, first of all, we've got to understand from an analytical point of view where the potential danger points are, making sure that we're very clear about which roads we're looking at. Most of those are parallel roads. You can see them running alongside. These are the service ways and other understanding. Many of you may already have a sat-nav, and you may already have seen as you go drive along a sat-nav, sometimes it will give you a speed limit from the road next door, which is clearly incorrect. Or worse than that, it still takes a few seconds as you drive past the junction for the car to work out which one you're on. As we move forward with the increasing the accuracy for the future and aspects like this, we'll be able to start resolving those issues. So we have to make sure that the analysis then also captures the roads in their entirety. Most of our road data is split down into small sections, so we have to combine those sections to ensure that the whole road is taken into account of, and that now this new aspect of it, this concern, safety concern, call it what you will, is covered. And then effectively we have to make sure that it's sort of, the analysis then can learn and make sure that we are aware of where the danger points are going to be. So effectively, using that data, we can now underpin, those are the danger points, those red areas there. Now that's just analysis for one small area, in one small area of Germany, in one small area of Europe. So you can see quite clearly how much analysis is potentially going to be required if we were to do that at a full country level, and how much analysis will be required as we start to look at the whole globe. I'm going to show you the one from Model Builder as well. It's a similar analysis. One for the spatial geeks, maybe, Ian, I don't know. I love it. But it's just showing how Model Builder, again, how much work is going in behind the analysis. And again, although it looks like a huge piece of work, it's actually just one very small area in terms of what we're working on here. I'll just let it play. It's very mesmeric, actually. It's very kind of my team. They put this together. They sat there for hours putting this piece for me. So. But again, it's how we can underpin the message, if you will, from the presentation is how we can underpin, how good spatial analytics will underpin many of the autonomous features of the future. And it's not just, again, I showed 6 features. There are going to be many, many other features that potentially we would need to use if you think about how complex the vehicles are going to be and the complex plane they have to work on. So just a few conclusions at the end of the day, and then we can shift to some questions. Autonomous driving is a thing for the future, but the near future. It's a really interesting question. Most people in the room raised their hands. There are levels of autonomy that are already in existence in one sense or another. As we move further down the line, again, you could argue, is it revolution or evolution? And we hear often the bad things, the incidents where autonomy has failed. What you often don't hear is actually the millions and millions of miles and kilometers where autonomy hasn't failed. So we can talk again at the question and answer session, I hope there are some questions, about some of the aspects of that autonomy and the future and maybe the sort of when values. I believe, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you if I didn't, that good spatial analytics will continue to be required as we move forward. We're going to think of many, many other areas, not just when we start thinking about meterage accuracy, then we have to think about centimeter accuracy. Certainly we've already invested time, effort and money in looking at lanes, potential lanes products, so that we know where a vehicle is in a lane. We're talking now centimeters accuracy. That's going to be required, and the vehicles are going to have to learn as we move along where they are at all times. But at the end of the day, it really is about safety. That's what our customers demand of us, to make sure that we can continue to drive that forward. We live in a litigious world. We know this. And we want to make sure that that safety remains the top of the agenda. In some senses, what we're talking about here is the quiet side, the slow drive towards, pun intended by the way, the slow drive towards analytics, which makes sure that we can all live in a world which is as safe as possible. Bearing in mind that at some point in the autonomous world we will go through a period where you have some aspects of autonomy and some aspects of humans driving on the road at the same time. That's where there's going to be some real challenges and really interesting approaches. Thank you for the moment. Thank you for the time. It's a fascinating subject, and I'm more than happy to talk in more detail on the booth for anyone who's interested. Again, it's just one of those areas where we're slowly trying to chip away to make sure that those sort of aspects can happen for the future. I appreciate the time, I appreciate you being here.